Hi, how you doing? And welcome back to another video on the channel. So it's the wildcard video for Game Week 8, a really popular time to be wildcarding. And even if you're not, hopefully this video will help you out with your transfers moving forward. It's what I think is the best team going with both Salah and Haaland in at the moment. So if you are new to the channel, please do subscribe. Had awesome support in the recent times, over 30 subscribers last Sunday alone, which is just amazing for a small channel. I do create all my own charts, so if you do like it, the support would be greatly appreciated. I am recording this before Sunday's games have kicked off, but any injuries, I'll pop some alternative players in the comments. I do discuss some different options throughout. So first of all, this team is 95% rated. It's not quite as high as the 100% rating we had last week, but there's not going to be many weeks where it is. But as long as it's in the mid 90 range, I think it's totally fine because there's a lot of variables as well that the data can't cover for. It is priced at 100.2 million, but that is if you're getting all the players in from scratch. Some of these players you're already going to own and you'll save value as a result. So in goal, I'm going for David Raya. Probably not a surprise. I feel like I've had him in these teams every week for a while now, but there's no reason to get clever with it. I just don't necessarily trust the Arsenal attackers as much as I do the defence. I think they can get rotated up front. There's a lot of options, and they just kind of share the goals around. Whereas David Raya is going to play, and if you are going to pick a goalkeeper from a certain team, it might as well be Arsenal. Now, when we take a look at the charts, all of these charts are just from this first 6 game weeks because I didn't want to create like biased data by including some game week 7 players who have already played, and that sort of create inaccurate charts compared to those players who haven't yet played 7 games. And shout out to people who gave me feedback on the video. This style of chart was really well received, and it shows the minutes per points. So I've done this for every position in this video. So goalkeepers, when I say minutes per point, that's how many minutes do they need to be on the pitch for in order to get one FPL point. And then we've also got their selected by percent up the left, so you can look for those popular players as well as those differentials. Now, here we can see that pretty much anyone to the left of this line is getting a point every 30 minutes that they're playing. So they're pretty good. It means they're essentially getting those 2 appearance points and a save point every week. Now, of course, it's not linear. Some weeks they might get a bit less, some weeks they might keep a clean sheet. But on average, if they're in your team every week, this is what they'll be getting you. Now, it is okay to go for someone like Raya, who's quite highly owned. It is a good strategy in FPL to select popular players because if you don't own them and they do well, they can really hurt your rank. So I absolutely don't mind going for a fairly popular player. However, if you were looking for a differential, some players underneath the 10% rank will really be good for your team. And there's players in there like Pope, Henderson, that you think are going to be really high scoring goalkeepers. So it depends what your strategy is. I've gone for Raya just because I think it's a good pick in the Arsenal defence. But if you wanted someone in that bottom left, I really don't mind it. You could play the fixtures. You could possibly go for two sort of 4.5 million goalkeepers and rotate them. It's a real personal strategy. So into defence, and I've highlighted Mukiele here. I know they've just lost 2-0 to Man United. I do think Sunderland doing really well, and Mukiele is getting DEFCON pretty much every week. He's averaging nearly 13 per game. That's comfortably in there. So even if he's not getting the clean sheets, he's probably getting defensive contributions. So it gives him a baseline of 3 points. I've also got Gabriel and Lacroix. I think if you're getting in a Crystal Palace defender at this point, I would get in Lacroix. I think Gahey is doing amazing, but he's also got a goal and an assist in his first 6 games, and that's just not sustainable. So I had him in my team. I took him out on a wild card because I just think, thank you very much. I'll take those points. It's unusual that you get those sort of attacking returns in such a short space of time. And then if I was to get in a Crystal Palace defender at this point, it'd be Lacroix. I'd just be sort of careful depending on how they fare in Europe. He's not going to get rotated, but they might get a little bit tired. Senesi is on the bench here just because he's playing Crystal Palace away. Palace are playing Bournemouth at home. I just prefer the Palace defender to start in this team this week, but you could absolutely go for a fallback and go for a 0-0. So into the charts, and it's the same style as the goalkeepers, minutes per point versus selected by percent. And essentially anyone to the left of this line is getting a point every 20 minutes they're on the pitch. So you just have to check that they're getting minutes. But this chart has only included defenders who are averaging 60 minutes per game. And the reason I've done that is because when you get to 60 minutes, you get those clean sheet points. We all hate those defenders who get subbed off on 59 minutes, and that kind of excludes those because ultimately you want your players on the pitch. The longer they're on the pitch, the more likely they are to get defensive contributions as well. Anyone below this line is a differential pick, and we can see that I've got two defenders who are quite popular in Gabriel and Senesi, selected quite highly by a lot of managers. And again, that's not a bad thing. You don't want a completely differential team. You want a team who have a good selection of highly owned players who can kind of keep you in tune with all the other FPL managers. And then you want some differential picks who are going to give you those edges, those sort of extra points that no one else is going to get. That's going to set your team apart. So the rest of my defenders ranking here, so really low owned differential players, and Lacroix and Mukiele pretty much averaging, a point every 15 minutes here, almost 10 minutes. I think all four defenders at the moment are doing really well. I don't see a reason to not go for any of them. If you're wanting a balanced defense, of course, you could invest more money in the defense and upgrade a Mukiele. I think if you are getting a cheap defender, one from Sunderland does look the best bet right now. So when we take a look at breaking down the defensive points from minutes per points and also minutes per defensive contribution, we can once again see that Senesi and Mukiele are ranking really well here. So they're essentially getting a defensive contribution almost every 3 minutes they're on the pitch. It is ridiculous. And I think this chart is really interesting just to see how often they're doing this because anyone sort of like Ekdal, who is also getting one under 10 minutes, is essentially going to get you defensive contribution points every game. So when we take a look at this line, anyone under the line here is essentially getting one every 9 minutes. That's why I've done it just below 10, because every 9 minutes, if they're playing 90 minutes, that's 10 defensive contributions. So I think anyone below the line for your defense is a great option. Feel free to stop the video at any point just to take a look at these charts as well. But I think this is great for visualizing where defenders are getting their points from. So into midfield, and of course we've gone for Salah here. This is a Salah and Haaland team, and I'll probably put out another team because it's the international break in a week or so with one or the other, and we can balance the squad out possibly a bit better. But I do think this squad is rated quite well. Now, Salah isn't performing like he should do. He's not worth the price. Just as I think Haaland probably long term isn't worth the price, but there's not a lot of expensive players out there at the moment this season, and it's whoever's getting you the most points, which is why Haaland is a must-have no matter what the price. Because if you can afford it and he's scoring the most points, it makes sense. And I don't really think Salah is doing as bad as everyone's saying. Once Liverpool figure it out, I do think that he is going to get more attacking returns. I'm recording this during the Liverpool Chelsea game, so it currently remains to be seen how Salah will do. I think he's a good pick if you can afford it. I've had to go a little bit cheaper and go for Xhaka from Sunderland again, so double Sunderland in this team, as well as Sa and Enzo Fernandez, who I think are really good picks, and we'll see that in the chart in a second. I've also gone for Semenyo because why would you not get Semenyo in your team? Please don't think, oh, I've missed the prices. He's too expensive now. If he started the season at 7.8 million or even 8 million and you could predict the future and you knew what he was going to do in the first 6 weeks, 7 weeks, you'd 100% get him in for that price. So don't worry if you've missed out on his original price. I think he's still great value. So into the chart here, and again, it's minutes per point. So how many midfielders are doing well in this metric? Well, we can see that Semenyo and Salah are getting a point. Well, Salah's getting a point still about every 15, 16, 17 minutes, and Semenyo is getting a point every 12 minutes in FPL, which is great. It's tremendous value. These are midfielders as well who have played at least 4 games or started at least 4 games, and they're getting 80 plus minutes at a minimum. So the reason I upped it for the midfielders in terms of minutes is because there's a lot of late goals in the Premier League. And sometimes if your defender gets subbed off at 60 minutes, that's not the end of the world because they bounce that clean sheet. with a midfielder, you want them on the pitch late in games because of that threat for late goals. So we can also see the other three defender midfielders here. And Enzo and Sa are doing really well. I think Sa is a super efficient player in terms of getting FPL points. And the same with Enzo Fernandez. There's no reason if you want a Chelsea player why he wouldn't be first pick out of all the Chelsea players at the moment. Defensively, I wouldn't go there. João Pedro is all right, and you could totally go hit for him for a bit of a safety pick because he's so highly owned. Enzo Fernandez, I think, is ranking really well. We've also got Granit Xhaka in here. Now, again, pause this video, take a look at the players ranked around this because someone at 5.5 million who's sort of involved in this area is pretty much just as good. It comes down to personal preference and the upcoming fixtures. I just think Granit Xhaka shows a lot of attacking threat as well as getting some defensive contributions along the way. So it ultimately leads to this area. So anyone in this rectangle is currently owned by less than 20% of FPL managers, and they're getting you an FPL point every 20 minutes. So it's not necessarily saying you should go for them over a Semenyo or even a Salah because Semenyo is doing great. This is where you could find your third, fourth, maybe even your fifth midfielder. That's good value. That's the differential. That isn't a Semenyo because if everyone has Semenyo, you're just not falling behind. These are those players we talked about where you can get an edge in your mini league and maybe own players that other people don't, and it just gets you that ahead. So up front we go, and it's João Pedro and Haaland. It's nothing groundbreaking here. You have to go with Erling Haaland at the moment if you're on a wild card. Even if you're not, there's not really a reason why you wouldn't get him in. I've gone for Mark Gui on the bench just as a cheap striker. I think the striking options just isn't there right now. So it's much better to have five midfielders, I think, and go for two forwards and you just sort of ride your luck with the forwards a little bit. When we get into this chart, you can see that there's just so few strikers and forwards who have played at least 4 games out of the first six, started at least 4 games, and are playing at least 80 minutes per game. Here we can see João Pedro and Haaland are just so separate from the rest. And I know João Pedro hasn't returned in his last 2 games. Maybe he will against Liverpool tonight. But Chelsea have also had a player sent off in each of those games. So it's almost worth disregarding that data because both of those sendings off, or at least the one against Man United, was really early on. And therefore, it really distorts the data. And I don't need to go into too in depth about how efficient Haaland is, basically averaging an FPL point every 3 minutes at the moment, which is just staggering. And I don't think he's going to keep it going all season, but you've just got to ride the wave whilst you can. So hopefully that explains the team pretty well. I think the overall strengths are that generally it's a popular time to wildcard. So if you're wildcarding at this point, you can keep up with a lot of other managers in terms of getting the general popular players in. But it's also a popular time to wildcard because of certain fixture swings, as well as being an international break. You get 2 weeks to look at your team as opposed to the standard one. And it also solves the Salah Haaland issues because you're not necessarily having to pick one. You can pick both, and the value elsewhere in the team means it is possible to do so, and you still get a really good pricing for your team. The weakness is eyes, there's no triple Arsenal, or essentially, there's no Arsenal attacker. Now, you can absolutely swap out a Sa or an Enzo Fernandez to a Declan Rice. It is possible to do that. I just preferred these two players as individual picks. And of course, if you didn't want Salah in your team, that gives you such a wide array of choices to get because you can get literally any other midfielder. You can upgrade one of your cheaper defenders and you can, really sort of solidify your team elsewhere. I think this team pretty much does the job. And another problem is that GUI makes three Chelsea players, so you can't get in another Chelsea player. Like, let's say you want Cole Palmer in your team, you can't get him right now because you own Mark GUI. So there is a chance that eventually he does play minutes, but I do totally get it if you don't want him in. And if you can afford a 4.4, 4.5 million striker, I would just go for that. because I think that's something that it just saves you that Chelsea spot. And if they're going to be third on your bench every week anyway, it doesn't really matter. So let me know what you think about the team. Let me know what you think about the charts. If you've got anything else you kind of want to see in any of these videos, some sort of data you want visualizing, I'm more than happy to help out and help you guys do as well as you can in FPL. So please do subscribe. Go check out my other videos as well if you're interested. All the data is fairly recent, and I will see you in the next one.